dash. The campaign's final weekend is here. The party leaders are eyeing the finish line and each other. Danger on display. Members of the Canadian reconstruction team in Afghanistan show off a critical find. In the wrong place. You'll see a lot of things in the River Thames, but you might not expect to see this. And a matter of trust. What's the value of voting? Brian Stewart on a question that has many Canadians divided. Plus, our At Issue panel is here.
The National. Here is Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. It's like those last couple of days of summer vacation. What's around the corner can bring a sense of great anticipation or one of decided dread. But you know, no matter what, there's only so much time left, so you better make the most of it. For Paul Martin, that final chance began today in the East at the water's edge. His message, a warning. Don't jump in without knowing exactly what lies beneath. Paul Hunter reports.
Famously, on the final weekend of the last campaign, Paul Martin put his foot in the Atlantic, then flew to the Pacific to do likewise in a final mad dash for votes. Would he this time? Nope. Things were different in '04.
That was June.
Yeah, that's right, a little colder now.
But Martin is on another mad dash, spending the last 72 hours of this campaign in a coast-to-coast bid for re-election. Today, St. John's.
We are 3 days away from the election, and I can tell you we're going to win that election.
How? The plan still seems to largely be by demonizing his main opponent. First, reworking an old but not forgotten here quote by Stephen Harper.
I don't believe there is any culture of defeat anywhere in Atlantic Canada.
Then, rhyming off a list of Conservative candidates
Cheryl Gallant, Rob Merrifield, David Sweet,
who Martin suggests Harper's been muzzling to hide their plans for Canada.
The question now is, what's going to happen after the election? Are these social conservatives going to stay in hiding? Or are they going to come out for the spring thaw? Are they going to come out, or are they going to start pressing their views, advancing their causes?
But it was Harper himself Martin again focused on. Later, jumping at the chance to restate his view, a Harper government would stack the courts with judges who'd threaten women's rights on abortion.
I think that the truth is plainly obvious. Stephen Harper will not do everything possible as Prime Minister to protect a woman's right to choose. And so to Stephen Harper, I issue a simple challenge. Tell us what you really think, yes or no. Do you support a woman's right to choose or not? Will you protect a woman's right to choose?
It wasn't all about Harper, but Martin, who acknowledges Liberals need to make a comeback to win, once again drove home that central message.
When you elect to be a Prime Minister, you'd better make sure he shares your values.
Expect that message at every stop Martin makes on this final cross-country bid for votes. Liberals say they believe it's a message voters are hearing and, more importantly, buying into. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Fredericton.
Well, Stephen Harper had his sights on suburbia today. His campaign road trip took him through southern Ontario, and at each stop he hammered home his core message. Again and again, he kept saying it's time for a change. But as Terry Malewski reports, Harper was constantly asked whether that change means reigniting some controversial issues.
With just one weekend left now, Stephen Harper began his day at a commuter train station, hoping to bring the all-important GTA on board, the Greater Toronto Area. He was all over the region today, urging voters not to give the Liberals another chance.
If the Liberals are re-elected, we will not have any kind of direction for this country. We will never find the money taken in the sponsorship scandal. The scandals, the cover-ups, the investigations will continue. We cannot have our country go forward like that.
Harper is also asking voters to focus on his platform, not on Liberal claims about his platform.
Obviously, when Mr. Martin makes these outrageous statements about what a Conservative government will and won't do, to make 2 points. One is that we obviously have a program, we've been clear with the public, and we operate within a constitutional and democratic system. And I think Canadians understand this, and I think, frankly, these tactics look increasingly desperate.
Once again, Harper insisted that he does not plan any legislation on abortion.
I'll keep my position, which has always been that there are far more important issues for the Canadian people, and those are the things I'm running on, and our platform's clear.
And wherever he went, Harper repeated his message for Quebecers.
Make no mistake about it. Every vote for the Liberal Party gives the separatists ammunition in Quebec to say that federalism is a force for corruption. We can't do this. We have to get a new government and unite this country.
Harper is now planning to dedicate one more precious day to the race here in Ontario, racing from Toronto to Guelph to Sarnia to Windsor, and then on Sunday out to British Columbia, before finally returning to Calgary for Election Day. Terry Malewski, CBC News, Oshawa, Ontario.
British Columbia is where Jack Layton again spent this day, the fourth in a row aimed at trying to firm up support for the seats his party already holds in that province and eke out enough to keep soft NDP voters from straying. His strategy, an election prediction and another new pitch. Susan Bonner reports.
For Jack Layton this Friday, it was once more into the BC breach. One last push in the province he hopes will deliver big gains for the NDP. Trading planes for the commuter train and risking some unscripted encounters to do what thousands of people in Vancouver do every day. Only not quite like this.
These phones that take pictures, eh?
Michelle Phelan used her camera phone to capture the moment, but Layton couldn't capture her vote.
It's not going to change my vote, but I still respect the fact that he's out here.
So Mr. Martin is back
on script in Vancouver, it was back to Liberal bashing, predicting a Liberal loss as more incentive to vote NDP.
Now, who is really going to stand up for working Canadians? The smoking hulk of a defeated Liberal Party? Or a strong, united, renewed, and effective NDP?
And the closest he's come yet to asking for the balance of power in a minority parliament.
If you want the Conservatives balanced in this next parliament, if you want an MP who will stand on the side of you and your family, day in and day out, then lend us your vote. Try us out. We will earn your vote every single time in the future.
At this point in the 2004 campaign, NDP support started leaking to the Liberals in an attempt to prevent a Conservative victory. Layton's trying to make the opposite happen this time, trying to snare progressive voters any way he can. A little Cantonese in this community, some burger bravado here, all of it reinforced by an enraged Ed Broadbent with his own anti-Liberal sentiment.
These are not progressive people. The only time they talk about being progressive is in the dying days of an election campaign.
Ed Broadbent is a tough act to follow for Jack Layton. Under Broadbent in 1988, the party won 43 seats, its best ever showing. Layton will only admit to wanting to win more than the 18 seats the party now holds, and a large enough number to be an effective force in national politics and in Parliament. Susan Bonner, CBC News, Vancouver.
Bloc Québécois leader Gilles Duceppe stepped up his campaigning today from location to location at a breakneck pace, and he plans to do the same over the weekend. Throughout this campaign, Duceppe has fired away at the Liberals and Conservatives. But as Nancy Wood reports, his main focus now is making sure his supporters are mobilized on Monday.
Gilles Duceppe's last-minute tour of Quebec took him to a pulp and paper plant in Gatineau to get supporters out to vote Monday and to persuade those tempted to vote Conservative to think again. The Conservatives, he says, have made empty promises about their ability to get Quebec more federal money.
We want people to be precise when they're talking about coming with a settlement with the fiscal imbalance. Not only words, figures, numbers.
Lest Federalists think the Liberals are any better, Duceppe reminded them of the sponsorship scandal.
With what they did, trying to buy our vote, Quebecers vote with our own money, with the ad scan, then with Option Canada, hand in hand with the Tories. I mean, I think that this is we have to sanction them.
It all leaves Quebecers with only one safe choice, he says, the Bloc.
Because we're the only party to defend Quebec's interests, and totally. When we're discussing Kyoto, we're not protecting the rich oil companies of the West. We're not protecting the automobile industry in Ontario.
In this campaign, more than ever before, the Bloc is courting the multicultural vote. In Montreal, at a Moroccan restaurant this morning, Duceppe appealed for their support. We need your vote, Duceppe says. And the Bloc has the means to get it out.
We're working very hard. I know that we're mobilized throughout Quebec. Every riding is very energized, and we have groups on the ground working. We've been working for 2 months, and I think those same volunteers are there until the end. We're not going to stop, and we'll see on the end of on the 23rd.
The Bloc has the organization on the ground to get out the vote, and it has a leader who doesn't have to visit any other part of the country in these last few days. What it doesn't have, though, is the ability to offer Quebecers a seat at the cabinet table in any future government. Nancy Wood, CBC News, Plessisville, Quebec.
An important reminder, our election night coverage begins half an hour before the polls close in your area. This is where it'll happen, the atrium of the CBC Broadcast Centre. Joining us, Canada's best political reporters, and Rick Mercer, even Ron McLean and Don Cherry. We'll also check in on the winners and losers all across the country. It'll be a big night. Still ahead tonight, dangerous mission. Canadian troops are getting ready for a much different role in Afghanistan. Is the Canadian public ready for what could happen? And the National Ballet of Canada heads south. Alison Smith on the risks and the rewards. The man who shot Pope John Paul II is back in custody. Police picked up Mehmet Aliachka after an appeals court ruled he must serve more time for crimes he committed in Turkey. Mayhem greeted Achka at the Istanbul police station. He was in handcuffs and yelled that he was the Messiah. He'd been free for just 8 days after serving 19 years in Italy for his 1981 attack on the Pope. Then 6 years in Turkey for murdering a journalist in 1979. Those 3 Canadian soldiers wounded in Afghanistan could be home soon. They're being treated at a U.S. military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. It's hoped if they're well enough, they'll be able to travel by early next week. But that's a big if. The condition of Corporal Jeffrey Bailey is the most precarious. Doctors say he's stable, but he has a fractured skull and brain injuries. He's also being treated for pneumonia. Private William Salakin has shown the most improvement. He's emerging from a drug-induced coma and is responding to commands.
Every day there's a little bit new, a little more consciousness, he moves around, tries to get comfy, and, if someone asks him to give him a thumbs up, he does it as well as he can, being drowsy, but yeah, there's definitely improvement.
Master Corporal Paul Franklin lost his left leg in the bombing, and now there is concern about his right leg. It's badly fractured, and doctors fear it may have to be amputated. Last weekend's suicide bombing has done little to chip the resolve of Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan. If anything, it's made them more committed to their mission, to the job of helping a troubled region, even if it comes with terrible risks. The CBC's Paul Workman is in Kandahar.
Which will take us south of Kandahar city proper.
The Canadian soldiers at this base are a protection force, bodyguards for aid workers and diplomats whose job is to help rebuild Afghanistan. The flag at their camp still flies at half-mast in honor of diplomat Glyn Berry, killed by a suicide bomber last weekend. Today, soldiers showed off a cache of 12 artillery shells, wired up as a suicide bomb before it was discovered and dismantled. That is the threat Canadians, both soldiers and civilians, face ever more frequently here.
So 12 of these together would definitely be lethal out to at least 75 meters, perhaps more.
Patrols leave the base almost every day, and that hasn't changed. The Canadians like to say they own the streets of Kandahar, yet there is certainly a heightened sense of caution and suspicion.
One of the main things for vehicles is vehicles that only have one occupant.
The Canadian soldiers on this team understand very well the dangers of patrolling the streets of Kandahar. They've already been attacked once by a suicide bomber and survived to patrol again.
It's a little bit starker here.
Today, they're protecting an Australian engineer as he tours city police stations. Every passing car is a potential bomb. but there is no lack of resolve or doubt about their mission.
The ones who are afraid are the insurgents here. You know, they don't want to come up and meet us face to face. They'd rather just pull themselves up in front of us.
Others aren't afraid to admit to rattled nerves. Major Andrew Lutz was in the convoy that was attacked last weekend with such deadly results.
I'd be lying if I said that it doesn't bring the reality of what we're doing here to light. I mean, you go through a bunch of days without an attack, you sort of feel like, oh, nothing like that will ever happen to us.
As painful as some of the ceremonies that we've had to go through, we need to focus that we still have several hundred people here in this theater, and we need to get on with the job, and we need to keep them as safe as possible.
There's little defense against a suicide bomber. It's a new tactic for the Taliban, meant to intimidate the enemy as much as to kill. And Canadians are in the line of fire. Paul Workman, CBC News, Kandahar.
Canada is sending more of its troops into the line of fire. Tomorrow, 60 soldiers from CFB Shiloh ship out, trading their Manitoba base for the dangers of Kandahar. They are the first wave of a 2,000-strong deployment, and they have no illusions about what they're heading into. Jolyn Shane reports.
Okay, Tyson, pick out a book.
Sergeant Kevin Gregory will leave tomorrow for one of Canada's most dangerous missions in years. But his biggest concerns are here.
The toughest part will actually be leaving, because whenever I'm packing up my kiddies, he's always, "Don't leave us, Daddy, don't leave us," and it's just heart-wrenching, but it'll be tough. Who didn't say their name?
To make this deployment easier, many soldiers have recorded bedtime messages for their children. A message of comfort, though the families of all the soldiers heading to Afghanistan know the danger. But security analysts say the Canadian public doesn't know what's going on, and should.
We're not talking about separating two combatants. We're talking about actually engaging a combatant to use deadly force to ensure the security of the societies that we are dedicated to protecting.
That is not traditional peacekeeping, and the military is clear about that. Its goal is peace, but the rules of engagement are changing. While Canada did command troops in Kabul, starting in early February, Canada will take over command of the multinational force in Kandahar province, a far less stable part of the country. The soldiers won't simply be defending themselves, they are authorized to seek out extremists, killing them if necessary.
Those who would attempt to prevent the duly elected Afghan government from achieving their aims and helping to bring Afghanistan along, or those are the people that we want to prevent doing that. And in the final analysis, if we have to go out and actually go out and go after those people, then we will.
But as Canada becomes more aggressive, the military expects to become more of a target. It's telling families to expect more casualties.
I think it's on their minds, but from what I've seen is most people have sort of set themselves in the stage that while they're going, they're just, going to send their prayers with them.
While Canada's military families say they're prepared for the soldiers' new role, the Canadian public may just be starting to understand. Jolyn Shane, CBC News, CFB Shiloh, Manitoba.
The star witness of the Oklahoma City bombing trials was released from prison today. Michael Fortier testified against Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, the two men convicted of carrying out the 1995 attack. He admitted he shared money from the sale of stolen weapons with McVeigh and went with McVeigh on a trip to case the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Fortier served more than 10 years for failing to warn police about the plot. The results of Iraq's December 15th parliamentary elections were officially confirmed today. The Shia-led United Iraqi Alliance won, but did not obtain an absolute majority. The party will now have to form a coalition government. Security has been tightened in Baghdad amid fears of increased violence by Sunni-led groups who dispute the results. There is a 48-hour appeal window, and after that, the results will be certified as definitive. Another Canadian activist is on his way to Iraq tonight. Alan Slater is a member of Christian peacemaker teams. 4 of his colleagues, 2 of them Canadians, are still missing after being kidnapped last November. Slater is making his 4th visit to Iraq. On previous trips, the grandfather of 7 has helped document alleged human rights abuses.
I would like Iraqis to know that there are many people here who are concerned about them, and I also
would like to be able to bring the stories of ordinary Iraqis back here to Canada.
The Department of Foreign Affairs advises against all travel to Iraq. Well, Big Ben, Buckingham Palace, St. Paul's Cathedral, in a city jammed with fantastic sights, you have to go some to get Londoners excited. Today, something did. Anne McMillan explains.
They couldn't keep their eyes on it. A great big whale swimming up the River Thames. The 6-meter northern bottlenose usually hangs out in the North Atlantic deep water, but somehow it's ended up in the middle of London.
We've never seen an animal like this before. Our records at the museum go back to 1913, and this is the first record of this species in the Thames.
As word about the unique visitor spread, they came to look in their hundreds.
I saw it blow and I saw the tail.
I saw the top of the fin. It was massive.
When the whale headed upstream into shallow water, rescue boats tried to turn it round. Fascination turned to concern.
There are so many boats disturbing it. Why don't they just leave it alone? It's almost kind of cordoned in by a circle of boats.
At one point, it looked as if the whale would beach itself. A man walked into the water to drive it back.
Well, we're very concerned about its condition at the moment. It's rising out of the water a lot, which shows it's distressed and it's injured.
Now scientists and divers have joined a huge rescue operation. They're hoping to get the whale turned round and back out to sea before it's too late. Anne McMillan, CBC News, London.
Soaring oil prices and disappointing earnings from General Electric and Citigroup sent New York's Dow Jones Index tumbling more than 200 points. Here's a look at today's key financial numbers. The ivory tower, far removed from the wheeling and dealing of the workaday world, right? Well, not exactly. One PEI professor has come up with his own scheme to reduce class sizes, and it doesn't have a lot to do with higher learning. Sophia Harris reports.
It's a deal that sounds too good to be true. Drop out of class and still pass the course. But that's the offer Professor David Wheel made students in this History of Christianity class.
Just email them, tell them you want the grade, and don't come back.
He offered 68%, and if you accepted it, he would just give you 68% for the class.
And for some, even that wasn't good enough.
A 68 if they agreed not to come. But they negotiated with me and got it up to 70.
And you're allowing this?
I'm encouraging it.
Wheel is a retired professor turned sessional lecturer at the University of Prince Edward Island. He says about 20 students out of a class of almost 100 accepted his offer.
It's better for everybody because a lot of the people actually, the class is too big. It was uncomfortably large, and a lot of the people who have taken the deal are people who didn't want to be in the class anyway.
The dropouts had only one assignment to pay for the close to $500 course. Many students say they don't have a problem with Wheel's deal.
I guess it's up to the student whether they want to go to the class or not, so.
I'm indifferent. I mean, I found it quite comical. I mean, the university might have something to say about it.
And the university did. Today it told Wheel the deal is unacceptable and the dropouts must return to class.
This is a place that prides itself on teaching excellence. We won a number of teaching awards for the standards we have, and this is an aberration.
Wheel will continue on with this class, but when asked if the professor will be allowed to teach any more courses here, the university replied, no comment. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Charlottetown.
When the Liberal government was toppled back at the end of November, some believed the ensuing election wouldn't really change that much. Tonight, few could argue it's been an uneventful 8 weeks. There have been a few surprises, some missteps, and of course, turning points. To talk about them all, our at-issue regulars. Joining us from Montreal, Toronto Star National Affairs columnist Chantal Hébert, and here in Toronto, Andrew Coyne from the National Post. Well, as we said going into this, there were certain assumptions made, myths created because of that. Which ones, give me one from each of you, a myth that has been debunked as a result of the last 8 weeks. Chantal?
Well, I can't give you just one because they go in a pair, and the obvious one is that there was only one national party in Canada, the Liberal Party. I think this marks the return of the Conservatives as a national force and as a mainstream party. And going with that, probably a bigger surprise, the notion that federalism is not really a spent force in Quebec. The Liberal Party, after the sponsorship, maybe, but not federalism.
All right, Andrew.
I guess a couple of things internal to the campaign was, one was that nobody would be paying attention in the first half of the campaign, and that was obviously the operating assumption of the Liberal Party. They essentially left the field clear for the first 4 weeks and gave Mr. Harper a chance to define himself, to get his policies out, and really to dominate the news agenda. And I guess the other thing was that leadership was going to be the Liberals' ace in the hole, that the longer the campaign went on, the Liberals thought that the less people would care for Mr. Harper. Mr. Martin would be the big asset for them. It turned out to be exactly the reverse. Mr. Martin's net ratings have gone down precipitously all through the campaign. Mr. Harper's have gone up, and in fact, he has helped buoy up his party's standings, which who would have predicted before the election?
All right, well, we've seen a lot of different things happen over the 8 weeks. In terms of striking developments, which was the one that struck you the most? Andrew first this time.
I guess the thing that was the bolt from the blue in terms of the campaign again was, of course, the RCMP investigation. That it tends to get overstated as being the be-all and the end-all of the election, but it came at such a perfectly timed moment for the Conservatives. Because, and I think this was interesting, that they, again, contrary to what people expected, they didn't talk about the scandals for the first 4 weeks. I think, which was a very savvy move on their part. It allowed people to chew on that themselves, to come to their own decision about how much that mattered to them. It turns out it mattered to them a lot. So but when the RCMP thing came along, just at the moment when the Conservatives were planning to pivot to that issue, put the two together, it was absolutely thunderstruck the Liberals.
Chantal, the most striking development?
The Quebec reaction to just one speech delivered on December 19th in Quebec City by Stephen Harper, where he basically said, I have an open hand to Quebec. I thought when I first heard about that speech a couple of days before that Mr. Harper was actually trying to bury his Quebec program, that he was trying to get rid of it in the pre-Christmas shopping season and then move on to other things. I was quite wrong, as you can see.
It's funny how we misjudged a number of things in that run-up to the Christmas break. Missed opportunities, the best chance that we're sitting there but not taken. Chantal?
I still think that the biggest missed opportunity was a Liberal one, and it happened when the RCMP announced an investigation. I think Prime Minister Martin should have asked his Finance Minister to step aside, not because he was guilty, but because Mr. Martin had been talking about setting a higher standard.
Do you think that would have really made a difference in the way things unfolded around those few days?
I think the RCMP investigation as such would have lent itself to more questioning as to why it was announced if the reaction had been swift and the Prime Minister had used it as a way to send a message that in my government tolerance will be zero and we will have the higher standards that we promised. I think the collision of the two focused on Mr. Martin, allowed the opposition to demand that someone be responsible politically, and that brought back all the bad memories from the sponsorship issue.
All right, missed opportunity. Andrew?
This may be a curious way of answering your question, but I think there was a missed opportunity for Mr. Martin to go out gracefully. This campaign has been, I think, to many members of his party, an increasing embarrassment. The shrillness of it, the hysterics of it, the really over-the-top charges. Here's a guy who's had, in some ways, a very distinguished career, certainly as finance minister, less so perhaps as prime minister. But he really did not go out, I think, on a note of class, and I think that's unfortunate.
Maybe he doesn't believe he's out yet.
Maybe.
There are 2 days. Who knows what's happening?
But there's ways to win and there's ways to lose, and either way, this has not been a credit to the political process.
All right. Earlier this week on our little Campaign Confidential, the Mystery Insider suggested at the end of his or her remarks that what we had witnessed over these last 8 weeks and really the last year was really a divided left as opposed to what we've become so used to, the divided right. What is the legacy for the left as a result of this campaign? Chantal?
I think that people who see themselves as the left have to ask themselves whether they want a party of their own in the House of Commons or whether they should just support the Liberal Party, because it is very hard for an NDP leader, and I'm not saying that Jack Layton ran a perfect campaign, but very hard to be damned if you take votes away from the Liberals and damned if you don't win new votes. And that is basically what happened to Mr. Layton over the course of this campaign at the hands of people who are identified to his values and his ideas. He is the only leader that was second-guessed so publicly every step of the way by natural allies.
And yet I think he carried himself extremely well. I think he ran an extremely good campaign, and they're going to get good results of this. They're going to increase their number of seats in the House probably by 50%. They may well get 20% of the vote, which would be their best showing in 5 elections. I think there are historic opportunities opening up for the NDP out of this, and I think they know this, that depending on how hard the Liberals fall, the Liberals, as Jack Layton's been saying, are going to spend the next couple of years in, at best, bitter recriminations, and if at worst, wholesale bloodletting. I think there is a chance here for the NDP to establish itself as a genuine rival with the Liberals and a genuine, over the longer haul, possibly a mainstream contender for power if they're prepared to go that route. But on your question about dividing the left, when you see either the right being divided or the left being divided, there's usually somebody doing the dividing. And if somebody else is driving the agenda, that's when you see these happen. The Liberals drove the agenda in the mid to late 90s and kept the right divided. The Tories, I think, perhaps not quite as successfully, but have been able to sort of drive the agenda in this election. That's when you see people talking about a division on the other side of the spectrum.
Okay, we've got a minute left. When Monday night starts to unfold and you start watching those results coming in, what are you going to be looking for first? Chantal?
Well, one thing hasn't changed in this campaign, and it's the crucial place of Ontario in the outcome. So while I'll be interested to see who gains what in Quebec, I'll be watching where Ontario goes.
Andrew?
It'll be interesting to see whether the Liberal showing in Quebec is or is not the worst showing in their history. The previous record, I believe, is 13 seats in 1882. These days, they're talking optimistically of 12. That would certainly be a shocker. The other thing would be if the Liberals are reduced to a number to fewer than the Bloc. Probably that's not going to happen now. It was looking like that a week ago.
All right. Well, we've got all your markers down, Andrew. You certainly made enough of them in this one. We'll hold you to account come Tuesday when we meet again in our post-mortem. Andrew Coyne in Toronto, Chantal Hébert in Montreal. We thank you both. Well, during this campaign, we've talked a lot about an issue you told us was important to you, trust. Tonight, just days before the election, we look at the greatest act of trust in a democracy, voting. In the last election, thousands of people rejected or spoiled their ballots in protest. Among activists, trusting the system is a divisive issue. Senior correspondent Brian Stewart now on where trust divides.
How strangely simple it seems. A cardboard box worth $1.65 into which one shoves a thin piece of marked paper. Our ballot joins other anonymous papers, and we leave. Yet this modest act captures the essence of political trust. We either trust these votes will be honestly counted somewhere and that the act is a valuable contribution to democracy, or we don't trust any of it. Some just don't bother. Others, a minority, reject elections in favor of direct protest action. Remember the APEC demonstrations 9 years ago in Vancouver, a 90s symbol of protest. Two men emerged as prominent agitators. Jaggi Singh, an anarchist, seized while protesting the presence of some glaringly undemocratic leaders at the APEC summit. The other, Craig Jones, a normally quiet human rights campaigner who became the most visible critic of police actions. What's interesting is this trust factor now divides them. Craig Jones is still active in civil liberties issues, but has become a mainstream lawyer who never fails to vote. Jaggi Singh, arrested at protests several times over the years, is one of thousands who formally reject their own ballot. An anti-vote stand rarely discussed at election time. I wanted to know more about their reasoning.
When it comes to democracy and the right or obligation to vote, you, Craig, still vote. Jaggy, you forcefully do not, very insistently do not. Why is that?
Well, I guess my values and my vision of how I look at Canada sees voting as reinforcing a system that I feel is fundamentally corrupt. I don't judge people that vote. I don't go out of my way to tell people not to vote. And I feel in many ways being part of the electoral process, not going out and just putting your ballot in the box, that just takes a few minutes, but that whole process and what it entails is a way of demobilizing people from being angry, from engaging in direct action, and from confronting systems of power. That's my issue with electoral politics and with voting in our context.
Craig, you embrace the electoral system. What's wrong with Jaggy's point of view?
I think that I'm overall less hostile to the system and the power structures in Canada than Jaggy is, and so I think that that his concern about reinforcing those by voting for me is outweighed by the potential benefits of voting, because I think that it does matter at the end of the day which party's in power, which representatives in the House of Commons. From my point of view, we can't say this is one tool in our toolkit that we're just simply not going to use, but we're going to use all these other ones. I'd like to use all of them.
We've all been in countries where literally people have had to take suicidal risks to win the right of vote that half of the Canadian public don't even bother to exercise, and a smaller minority, including yourself, forcefully refuse to exercise it. Isn't there a kind of guilt feeling there somewhere that we've got this gift that so many people dream of, yet you throw it away?
Let's not confuse voting with democracy. What's important here is democracy. Democracy meaning the power that you have in your life, your ability to have control over the choices that you make. One manifestation that we're talking about here is through voting. But I think democracy is the important word here. And how does democracy manifest? And when we talk about true democracy, I don't think Canada necessarily stands as the greatest model. I mean, I think, for example, to look elsewhere, the Zapatista model right now in southern Mexico, this indigenous uprising is highly, highly democratic. It's all about giving power to people and people having control of their lives. It's not parliamentary, but it's democratic. It's democracy. I'm trying to convey, and I'm trying to be a bit of a provocateur in doing so, I'm trying to say that I believe genuine, real change happens beyond the parliamentary system.
If you believe more in the system, I guess, as I do, rather than Jaggy, then you think that it's something to celebrate and that there's an expressive value in that. I like going to the voting centers. I like seeing the volunteers and getting the sense of community that I feel, and it doesn't matter what election it is, if it's municipal or provincial or federal. I really enjoy that, and I think that it's important for our sense of community to engage in that as well.
I think you're glorifying a bit this national coming together. Coming together and sense of community, I feel that in other aspects of day-to-day life, even within a large city, which is sometimes alienating. It's when people stand together, like in Montreal, for example, when 200,000 people marched against the impending war in Iraq, people from all backgrounds, even smaller demonstrations, but people who come together. And I see elections as sort of sheep, us being sheep, and not being much more critical of what this is about, and so that's how I see it. And I know that's going to seem insulting to a lot of people, but I think it needs to be said.
Is it insulting, Craig?
I think it's insulting maybe to people to whom it's directed, and I mean maybe Jaggy's trying to be provocative, as he said, but just because voting day or the election process isn't everything doesn't mean that it's nothing, and I guess that's the attitude that I take towards it, why I think that it's still important to go out and do it, even apart from the cultural ritual.
So Craig Jones trusts traditional political elections to be a vital tool to win Canadians protection and needed benefits. Jaggy Singh believes that very electoral system undermines, suffocates the grassroots causes that alone spearhead fundamental change.
What annoys you, Jaggy, about somebody like Craig, who was an activist, who firmly believed in the cause, but now seems to have completely embraced that mainstream that you don't really trust that much?
Craig doesn't annoy me. He's a lawyer, so he believes in the rule of law. I'm sure he's critical of it and what have you, but he has a certain amount of faith in that. And that's not annoying to me. I disagree. And it's a challenge to have him respect and see how, let's say, an anarchist or more radical perspective on the power system is valid and can be realizable. It's not utopic, it's not idealistic, but is realizable. And when you describe Craig as a protester, I don't know if sure he would describe that himself as a protester. Maybe an activist, fine, but a protester. Because I remember when I was sitting in the jail cell in Vancouver in '97, and Craig walked in, and I thought maybe he was visiting and what have you, and he was in jail, and I said something's wrong here.
I used to joke that I was a protester for precisely about 10 minutes and then got my ass arrested, and that was the...
I mean, I guess in terms of what annoys me, it's not Craig that annoys me. What annoys me is that we don't give more voice to grassroots movements within Canada. The incredible acts of dignity, of democracy, small scale and even larger scale that we see. For example, there was the Quebec student strike, general strike that happened last year. This was an incredible democratic flourishing where youth, 16, 17, 18, 19, went on a general strike, kept that going. We're having general assemblies. We're talking about how the education system should run.
So how do you respond, Craig?
Well, flattered. I mean, you know, you can't criticize Jaggy from the point of view of the level of effort and the level of intensity. I mean, he's a full-time citizen, whether he likes to think of himself that way or not. There's no animosity there. I mean, sometimes I'm frustrated with the extent to which activists turn their backs on the toolbox of power in order to effect change. They're much more concerned about being right than being effective. I'm much more concerned about being effective, frankly, than articulating any coherent utopian worldview. I know Jaggy doesn't like that term. I'm much more interested in the baby steps necessary. I think if we look at positive social change, it tends to be incremental, and it only happens when the toolbox of power is opened and the tools are picked out and actually used, as opposed to just being talked about.
Use the tools. Well, why not use the tools? You could be made perhaps a very effective MP if you were to.
No, I won't be running as an MP. But just to respond to that, I guess my rebuttal to that would be it is an effective step, but I think it is an effective step for people to say, yes, we're going to reject these systems of power and we're going to confront them. No, but if we get really specific, let's take the context we're in the world right now, where we've destroyed a country called Iraq. Canada's implicated in Afghanistan. We're in Afghanistan so that America could have more troops in Iraq. I'm going to be clear about their rejection, and by rejecting that, I'm going to conceive of other options in terms of my organizing and activism and alternatives to confront that. And nothing that I say is really meaningful unless it's accompanied by that organizing capacity to fight back.
My point would just, in response, would just be that I mean, Jaggy's absolutely right that this element is necessary, but my point is that it's not sufficient. Let's put it this way, evolving the criticism of something that's bad into a positive legislative agenda, for lack of a better term, is the much more difficult thing. It takes longer, and it takes compromise, and it takes all those messy elements of democracy that maybe don't sit well with a pure ideological worldview of any sort. But that's what's really necessary to make this stuff real, instead of just a pattern of criticism.
Well, it's nice to see, despite all your differences, you're still engaged and can still hammer it out with each other.
It's been great to reunite with Jaggy. It's been a very fun day. Thank you.
Jaggy Singh, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Craig?
Thank you.
See you.
When we come back, we'll catch up with the National Ballet. First, thoughts on Canada from someone who calls this country home.
Hi, I'm Mike Pinball Clemens, head coach of the Toronto Argonauts. I was born to a single parent in Florida, and growing up in the States, we talk about the American dream. We talk about being clean and being safe and being multicultural and having opportunities in commerce, in every facet of life, the arts, the culture. In Canada, it is the Canadian reality. The American dream is the Canadian reality, and it is the people that make it possible. When we look at the greatness of our country, we look at hockey. Hockey is one of our passions, certainly, and we are the best in hockey in the world, right? Our question is why can't we be the most educated country in the world as well? Let's make sure that we educate all of our youth, but not just our youth. As adults, let's make sure that education, that learning is a lifelong endeavor. What could we not do without? I would suggest growing up in Florida, it's the snow. It's cold here. The snow actually helps to build character in our people. I think it gives us a greater appreciation of all the seasons, a greater appreciation of life, and it is indeed who we are.
More from the CBC's nightly news program after this.
Saturday on the C-SPAN networks. I'd look at some events from earlier this week. First, on C-SPAN, 2 speeches on domestic surveillance and the war on terror. We'll begin with former Vice President Al Gore from Monday. And later in the week, Vice President Dick Cheney in New York. Later, a Senate hearing on broadcast decency and regulating adult content online. On C-SPAN 2's Book TV, Joe Lepore looks at 18th century slavery in Manhattan. Later, Peter Bergen on Osama bin Laden, and at 9 p.m. Eastern, John Perkins' book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, currently on the New York Times bestseller list. On C-SPAN 3 History, a look at presidential inaugural addresses. First, President Kennedy from 1961, and later President Reagan from 1981.
Arizona Senator John McCain in South Carolina, Sunday on C-SPAN's Road to the White House 2008. Senator McCain spoke at the Spartanburg County Republican Party's annual fundraising dinner, and South Carolina is expected to host the first Southern presidential primary in 2008. Senator John McCain, Sunday evening at 6:30 and 9:30 p.m. on C-SPAN's Road to the White House 2008. Road to the White House is also available as a C-SPAN podcast.
On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate begins debate on the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Samuel Alito. Also, during the first part of the second session of the 109th Congress, senators may take up lobbying reform. The U.S. Senate is live on C-SPAN 2. The U.S. House returns on the 31st to debate an extension of the Patriot Act. Some provisions expire on February 3rd, dealing with federal searches and seizures, wiretaps, and monitoring of Internet and email use. Also, more work on the $40 billion savings plan, which includes program cuts and revenue increases. The House may vote on that when members return. And Republicans will have leadership elections in early February to replace former Majority Leader Tom DeLay. The House is live on C-SPAN.
We will have full coverage of the election returns on C-SPAN, and we will return now to the CBC's news program, The National, for the preview of Canada's upcoming parliamentary elections. This is live coverage here on C-SPAN.
Canada's National Ballet is putting its best foot forward in Washington these days. It's also showing off Canadian choreography with James Kudelka's version of Swan Lake. On tonight's national scene, Alison Smith caught up with the dancers and their boss.
There is formality and precision in their grace, refined movements centuries old, so well practiced. It's been 14 years since the National Ballet of Canada was here in the practice rooms of Washington's famed Kennedy Center. Karen Kane was a prima ballerina then.
Oh, I have so many memories when I walk into this theater. The first time I was here, I was dancing with Fontaine and Nureyev in 1976. And I remember sitting in a dressing room in this theater talking to Fontaine and getting to know her.
Now, with a watchful eye as the company's artistic director, Kane is trying to build the kind of ballet company that evokes the magic of the world's best.
Well, if you want to consider yourself a world-class company, then you have to be able to be compared at that level, and you have to be seen internationally. It's important to be judged by people who don't know us personally at all.
The Canadians have brought perhaps the world's most famous ballet, Swan Lake. but with bold choreography, a new interpretation. A Canadian original making its American debut.
I think it's a little bit more edgy. I think it's nice to show that off, and for touring purposes, it's a different perspective for people, I think.
I think our version of Swan Lake is very athletic. You know, I think it has a lot for the men, has a lot for the core. Everybody's dancing all the time. It's a huge production, and I think that's something that is really different.
But will a different Swan Lake appeal to this audience? Opening night, a sense of anticipation.
Canada is our neighbor, and of course, everyone loves Swan Lake.
It's expensive to take the show on the road, about $500,000 this time. And the National Ballet is only here because the Kennedy Center offers a financial guarantee. There's no guarantee with the critics.
I don't think this is going to rank up there as one of the definitive versions of Swan Lake. The dancing, on the other hand, I thought was really fine, and that's why I was a little disappointed to see that, you know, it wasn't really the best framework for the dancing.
The National Ballet doesn't have a star as bright as Karen Kane on its stage, but Kane is determined to tour this company, take critical risks with the hope that audiences will discover new stars in the National Ballet of Canada. Alison Smith, CBC News, Washington.
Here's how you can reach us.
We are bringing you the CBC's nightly news program live today. We'll have more after this.
Saturday on the C-SPAN networks, I'd look at some events from earlier this week. First on C-SPAN, 2 speeches on domestic surveillance and the war on terror. We'll begin with former Vice President Al Gore from Monday. And later in the week, Vice President Dick Cheney in New York. Later, a Senate hearing on broadcast decency and regulating adult content online. On C-SPAN 2's Book TV, Jill Lepore looks at 18th century slavery in Manhattan. Later, Peter Bergen on Osama bin Laden, and at 9 p.m. Eastern, John Perkins' book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, currently on the New York Times bestseller list. On C-SPAN 3 History, a look at presidential inaugural addresses. First, President Kennedy from 1961, and later President Reagan from 1981.
Arizona Senator John McCain in South Carolina, Sunday on C-SPAN's Road to the White House 2008. Senator McCain spoke at the Spartanburg County Republican Party's annual fundraising dinner, and South Carolina is expected to host the first Southern presidential primary in 2008. Senator John McCain, Sunday evening at 6:30 and 9:30 p.m. on C-SPAN's Road to the White House 2008. Road to the White House is also available as a C-SPAN podcast.
On Wednesday, the U.S. Senate begins debate on the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Samuel Alito. Also, during the first part of the second session of the 109th Congress, senators may take up lobbying reform. The U.S. Senate is live on C-SPAN 2. The U.S. House returns on the 31st to debate an extension of the Patriot Act. Some provisions expire on February 3rd, dealing with federal searches and seizures, wiretaps, and monitoring of Internet and email use. Also, more work on the $40 billion savings plan, which includes program cuts and revenue increases. The House may vote on that when members return. And Republicans will have leadership elections in early February to replace former Majority Leader Tom DeLay. The House is live on C-SPAN.
We will bring you CBC's election coverage Monday night beginning at 9:30 p.m. here on C-SPAN. We've been showing you the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's nightly news program, The National, and we will return to that now here on C-SPAN.
Well, before we go, a few things to watch for during this final weekend of the campaign. If you missed any of our Your Turn shows with the party leaders, you can catch up tomorrow. CBC News World will replay our programs with Jack Layton, Paul Martin, Stephen Harper, and Jim Harris. from 1:30 until 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and again in the evening, beginning at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 on the West Coast. And be sure to catch CBC Radio's cross-country checkup this weekend. Rex Murphy will be taking your calls. What are your thoughts on the campaign, and are you struggling with your ballot box decision? Give Rex a call. Let him know. And join us for our final installment of Behind the Ballot. Since the campaign began, we've been going deep with insight and analysis. You can catch the show at the times listed right there on your screen. And that's The National for this Friday night. For news anytime you want it, just go to cbc.ca. Claire Martin is next with your national weather forecast. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Have a great weekend.
Thanks very much, Peter.
And we'll bring you live CBC coverage of the returns in those Canadian elections Monday night beginning at 9:30 Eastern here on C-SPAN.